Well, you know something, Mean Gene. Due to this coronavirus, we haven't been able to go out and film as much as we'd like to. So you know what the Hulkamaniacs are gonna do? They're gonna do whatever the millions and millions of my subscribers would want us to do, and that is every single week lay it the smack it down on every single channel out there with the best videos. And this week we're starting with pro wrestling. If you smell what I'm cooking, roll the intro. As I mentioned, yes, due to COVID, unfortunately, we cannot do any traveling. So those travel vlogs, unfortunately, are taking a bit of a pause. This also means I can't travel to any wrestling shows. I was supposed to attend Double or Nothing in Vegas this past May, and that did not happen. But what I'm gonna do is venture into some new videos based on my interests. So I'd like to welcome you all to Chris Keen Studios. And the first thing I'm going to start talking about is professional wrestling. Now, I've been a professional wrestling fan for almost 30 years. I grew up watching professional wrestling. I was a very big WWF fan back in the early 90s. Hulk Hogan was probably my favorite wrestler back then. I also liked Macho Man Randy Savage. And then, of course, Bret the Hitman Hart. Professional wrestling over the years has evolved greatly, going back to the days of the territories, to Vince McMahon's WWF buying up the territories and expanding his operation throughout the whole United States and eventually going global, to the Monday Night Wars of the mid and late 90s, which made many of us pro wrestling fans. After purchasing WCW in 2001, Vince McMahon had himself a monopoly, and there was a long period of time there where pro wrestling was WWE. A lot has changed within the past 5 years or so, and the indies started to grow. You started seeing Ring of Honor becoming popular. You started seeing Impact Wrestling becoming popular. New Japan Pro Wrestling has really grown, and with it, new stars have emerged. Pro wrestling has also grown inside the ring, as these tremendous athletes are reaching newer heights every single week they go out there. Now, what I'd like to do is respond to some questions that some people asked me on Twitter. Make sure you follow me at Chris K Films, right there. And the first question comes from Diaper-Filled Piss Baby. What? What the f? As someone who is newer to wrestling, why is AEW better than WWE? Very good question. As you're new to wrestling, welcome. I definitely want to make sure everybody feels welcome in the pro wrestling community. I do want to say that the pro wrestling community is filled with a lot of great people. Over the years, I've traveled and met many myself. Back in 2016, I traveled to Dallas for WrestleMania 32, and I went solo. So I went alone, and I was able to make many friends, many acquaintances, and I did not feel alone while I was there. Pro wrestling fans are great people. We do take care of each other, and we do need to remember to continue to support each other. Now, as to why AEW is better than WWE, I mean, that's really just a matter of personal preference. Some people love WWE and what they offer, others love AEW and what they offer. For me, being a fan of pro wrestling in the 90s, I think AEW gives me more of that flavor than what WWE does today. I find WWE to be way overproduced. When I watch pro wrestling, I want to get a bit of a sports feel from it. And WWE has really gone away from that professional sports atmosphere. To me, they are a weekly episodic TV show filmed in front of a live audience, whereas AEW has a bit more of that grittier feeling that anything can happen. WWE also overly scripts their products, so they have a whole bunch of writers on their staff. They have Vince McMahon, who typically rips up these scripts and rewrites them minutes before the show.
Seriously, what the f are you doing?
You know, I do have a lot of respect for the wrestlers that have to work in that environment. Whereas in AEW, they're often just given bullet point notes. They're told to go out there, sell this match, or get this point across, and you know, there you go. You're free to deliver it in any way you want. And with that, you're giving the creativity back to the wrestlers. I really enjoy that. But at the end of the day, it really comes down to what is your preference. You know, do you enjoy the storylines and the presentation that AEW is giving you? Do you enjoy the wrestlers in WWE? Do you enjoy the style of wrestling that AEW is giving you? They're a bit more of a high-flying style. Lately, they have been sort of reeling that in a little bit, but still, they are a much different style from WWE. And I also like to use WWE's terminology in this as well. Are you a fan of pro wrestling, or are you a fan of sports entertainment? And also, since you're new to the wrestling industry, I do want to bring your attention to other wrestling companies that are out there. Impact Wrestling does put on a fairly decent show. You will see some people there that you may recognize from AEW or WWE. I'm also a big fan of Ring of Honor. And also New Japan Pro Wrestling has a very huge following. Okay, on to the next question. And this comes from Ty Party. Ty asks, what is the best tag team wrestling duo these days? Well, that's a very good question, Ty. And no matter what I say, I'm probably going to upset someone.
It's only a game. Why you have to be mad?
So I will give a list of wrestling tag teams that I personally enjoy. All Elite Wrestling has many EVPs, and the Young Bucks are among them. And they really pledged to bring back tag team wrestling. Tag team wrestling had really been a lost art since WWE had their monopoly on the pro wrestling industry. In recent years, I've been a big fan of the Usos, and the New Day have been constantly reinventing themselves and have provided good entertainment. Outside of WWE, they just signed with Impact Wrestling. I'm a huge fan of the Good Brothers, Doc Gallows and Carl Anderson. They were grossly misused in WWE, and I think they definitely have a lot to offer and are a huge get for Impact Wrestling. Over in Ring of Honor, I'm a huge fan of the Briscoes. You know, these guys have been in the business for 20 years. They've been an amazing tag team over the years. They've had some success in singles, but ultimately as a tag team, these guys are very unique. They know how to sell a match. They know how to put on an entertaining match. I definitely have them near the top of my list. And on to AEW, that has an absolutely stacked tag team division. You've got the Lucha Brothers. You've got Santana and Ortiz. You've got FTR. You've got SCU, and you've got, personally, my favorite, the Young Bucks. Why are these guys my favorite tag team? They're the whole package. These guys can sell a match. These guys can put on a great match. They can also put over their opponents and still maintain credibility. It's worth noting that despite being EVPs, the Young Bucks have not yet held the AEW tag team titles. These aren't selfish people here. These are guys that put on a great show. They were dedicated to bringing back the art of tag team wrestling. They've put over several different tag teams in AEW, including Private Party, who have a very bright future ahead of them. I do look forward to the Young Bucks eventually winning the AEW tag team titles, but before that, I'm really looking forward to their upcoming match with FTR, whenever that may be. And our next question comes to us from the Sandman. I don't think it's the former ECW wrestler, the Sandman, but you never know. Thoughts on babyface versus heel dynamic? Still compelling or outdated? On that note, how do you think the fans' consumption of wrestling entertainment changed over the last 20 to 30 years? And how has AEW, WWE adapted accordingly? Great question. There's a lot there, so let's get to it. Firstly, my thoughts on the babyface versus heel dynamic. You know, I don't know if that it's necessarily too outdated. I think even in today's society, we like to see the good versus evil. But I think the traditional roles of a babyface and heel may be a bit outdated. I think you really need to go with who the fans tell you is a good guy, who the fans tell you is a bad guy. In some cases, it's pretty obvious who the heel is supposed to be and who the babyface is supposed to be. But if you have a babyface that you're really pushing to get a title shot and the fans are booing that guy or girl, outright rejecting them in their current role, you have to roll with what the fans want. And if the fans are booing someone, heels get booed, babyfaces get cheered. That person that's getting booed is not a babyface. The frustration comes in when pro wrestling companies continue to force that on you. If they force that this person is a babyface, you must cheer this person, the fans are just going to continue to reject them, continue to boo them, and it does not help the wrestler at all, and does not help putting on a good show. Wrestling companies have to adapt to that. From what I've seen, AEW has done a very good job of adapting to that. And I also give AEW a lot of credit for building storylines over the long term. You don't always see storylines getting resolved in the next month or by the next pay-per-view. And I do enjoy that you can't see something, extend into the future. It really adds to the product, it adds to the feud, and it gives a lot of meaning. But at the same time, I also enjoy how AEW doesn't give you the same match over and over and over again. sometimes in WWE, and this was a major criticism of mine, is that you would get the same two people wrestling 4 or 5 times before pay-per-view, and then they'd have another match at the pay-per-view. And by that time, you know, you wanted the feud to be over because you were done with it. With AEW, they don't do that. Cody Rhodes and MJF had a very famous feud going on. They've had 1 match to date. MJF won that one. It wasn't a clean victory, so they did have an excuse to potentially go with a rematch, but they haven't done that yet. And you know what? There's something to look forward to in the future. And to the second part of your question about how fans consume pro wrestling, you know, it clearly has evolved over the years, much like our consumption of any form of entertainment has evolved. I think pro wrestling still has a major live spectator component, although during this COVID era, not so much. But fans don't necessarily have to tune in live each week to consume their wrestling. With the invention of PVRs over the year, a lot of wrestling fans have resorted to PVRing their wrestling. I PVR Ring of Honor. And just simply comparing what the ratings were in the 90s to what they are today, there's really no comparison there. I think a lot of wrestling fans do consume their wrestling through the internet. And with the invention of the WWE network, a lot of fans consume their wrestling that way as well. With the explosion of the internet in the late 90s and early 2000s, a lot of fans do have access to the insider wrestling terms and a little bit of the backstage politics that go on. And with it come the spoilers. And WWE in particular has been hit hard by a lot of their shows being spoiled online. I'm not sure what the overall impact that would have on ratings, but I do know that that can take away from one's enjoyment of a show.
Stop it. Get some help.
So thank you guys for the questions. I really enjoyed answering those. You know, I do want to say that whether you're a fan of WWE, whether you're a fan of AEW, pro wrestling is something for all of us to enjoy. We don't work for these companies, so there is definitely no need to put someone down for what show they prefer. If someone likes a show that's different from the show that you like, does it really change your life at all? So I know the online wrestling community has gotten quite toxic, especially in recent years. I think we all need to get back to what brought us here in the first place. And for all of us, it's the same thing. We all have a love for professional wrestling. So to each and every one of you, enjoy whatever show you like. Let's all start being a lot nicer to one another. And let's not talk about whether your favorite company should go out of business, because my favorite company is what I like.
What's wrong with you, bro? What the heck? You tripping, bro. You tripping.
I hope you guys enjoyed watching this video. If you have something else you'd like to see in a future video, please leave a comment below. Make sure you hit that subscribe button, hit that like button if you enjoyed this, and I will see you guys next week. And that's the bottom line, because I said so.